Welcome to episode 7 of The Catch Up, a podcast from The Daily Catch where we take you inside the news. My name is Walter Mullin, and I'm the publisher of The Daily Catch.
And I'm Emily Sachar, the editor of The Daily Catch.
In this podcast, we discuss stories that have appeared in the paper. We give you insights into how we put the stories together, offer some additional observations, and discuss where the stories may be heading as we move forward. Emily, let's catch up.
Let's do it.
Our first topic today is a sad story about the death of a Bard professor in a drowning incident in California.
Yes, that's correct. And I want to really hats off to our community for alerting us to this. We did not hear about this from Bard. We heard about this from a listener who informed us that there had been this tragic incident. And the way we actually heard about it speaks to the importance, I think, of local news and to having people in our community who are paying attention to things that we can't be on top of. So what happened there was a woman, a Bard professor, very beloved, was out hiking in California, as far as we know, in an area called the Yuba River, about 2.5 hours northeast of San Francisco, with a friend. We don't know which friend. And she was in a bathing suit, which suggests that she either intended to swim or had been swimming or, was expecting to be near water. And she apparently slipped and went down this very, very dangerous, rushing river at a time when the state police and sheriff's office and fire department had encouraged people to be nowhere near the area that she was in. At the same time, though, we have seen photographs of people sitting on rocks out there, sort of in the water, near the water. So it's a very tragic story. As far as I know, her body has not yet been found. If it has been, we have not been able to capture that. But Bard did announce her death in a letter to the Bard community last week, I believe last Thursday, late afternoon.
Yeah.
And a memorial service is planned for her in, I believe, South Carolina in the next few days.
It's a very sad story. It just goes to show the power of water. I mean, you hear about people who are on the beach. You hear about people who can be on the beach and a rogue wave can take them out. Very sad.
Very sad. And as this reader who alerted us also said, it happened exactly a year after Lin Nguyen died near Bard in the traffic fatality. It was literally Memorial Day weekend, Saturday, late day. So very tragic story.
Very sad. Let's move on to our next story, which is a fairly big one. The Democratic caucus was held on Saturday night to fill 2 seats on the town board, on the Red Hook town board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I'm sorry.
Let's start by just trying to explain to listeners what a caucus is and why a caucus was held to fill these seats.
Yes. So it's up to the Democratic committee in any given town in New York State to set the policy for how they will get candidates to run for election. So in Red Hook, that system is a caucus system. You could also have a primary system. And in fact, we see primaries in other local towns near us. But that's the system that's been in place for a long time in Red Hook, predating my arrival in Red Hook. And so we had 3 candidates. We were wondering, leading up to the caucus, if there might be an extra candidate who would be put in place. We can talk a little bit more about that. We had Kane Migliorelli, who's actually an independent, running. We had Christina Ducharme, and we had the incumbent Christine Kane. So that's what brought us up to that moment for the caucus on Saturday afternoon.
What are the differences or the benefits of a caucus versus a primary, pros and cons of each?
Well, a primary, as we saw actually with this caucus, where certain people who are Democrats couldn't participate, a caucus requires that you be present, that you be in the room, that you're part of that moment in time. Whereas a primary allows people to vote. Sometimes there's early voting, there usually is. It allows people to spread their vote out over the course of a day. So if they're working or whatever, they can find another time to get to the polls. They're always held on Tuesdays, so they're easy to plan around. This caucus was announced just a few weeks before it actually happened. So that meant that if you already had plans, but you wanted to participate, you couldn't. There's no absentee ballots with a caucus. But some people, look at the Iowa caucus for the presidential election. Some people love a caucus. They think it's just a fantastic way to bond with your neighbors, to gather your opinions in real time, to be influenced by what others have to say. And to that point, an interesting thing happened actually at this caucus along those very lines. Sarah Imboden, the party chair for Red Hook and also the chair of the caucus, announced literally minutes before people were going to vote that the party committee had decided the night before the caucus to endorse two of the candidates. They endorsed Christine Kane and they endorsed Christina Ducharme. And that was announced at the caucus. So that could have really upended the result. I don't know what impact it had. We'll never know. But that's the kind of thing that you normally would have done well in advance. You wouldn't be doing that in the caucus at itself or in the voting moment where voters have presumably made their decisions up.
And didn't Robert McKeon also send out an email supporting Christine Kane?
Yes, so that's a really interesting point, Walter, and I'm glad you brought that up. Robert McKeon, several days before the caucus on Thursday afternoon, sent an email letter to a group of people that, when I interviewed him, he said were people he had known over the years, because he's not theoretically supposed to go into the file of emails that he may have as town supervisor. And he encouraged them not to vote or to vote for Christine Kane. And he did not say anything about Christina Ducharme, as far as I know, in that letter. I can't remember exactly, but he really went after Kenny Migliorelli and said that he's not a Democrat, he's given to Republican causes. And then he talked at some length about the boat club and said the boat club, he would always protect the people of Barrytown. The boat club, of course, is in Barrytown. And we can talk later about the degree to which the boat club issue may have had an impact on the caucus. But yes, he was lobbying for his candidate. Now, of note, McKeon was expected to have found, as really one of the leaders of the Democratic Party in our community, the Red Hook community, was expected to have found another candidate, because actually there are two open seats, one of them held by Julia Solomon, who now, of course, is a lame duck. She announced that she was not going to seek re-election. But he was not able to convince anyone else to run, which is one of the reasons that there was an opening for Ken Migliorelli to come in and not just run, but win.
So let's talk about what actually happened at the caucus. It was held on Saturday night, and the turnout was extraordinary.
Yeah, just extraordinary. 242 people checked in to cast votes and cast votes at the election. If you multiply that by 2, that means what? 484 votes could have been cast. There were not 484 votes cast, which tells us that a certain number of people only voted for one candidate. That is believed to have been, those people are believed to have voted for Christine Kane, because the message apparently went out before the caucus that to strengthen Christine Kane's chances of winning or coming in second, which was the necessary threshold, vote for one candidate only and make it be her. So it was a very well-attended caucus. As far as we know, it was the most people that attended a caucus in 10 years. Now, whether it's the most in history, we don't know. But we were told by Sarah Imboden, again, Democratic committee chair, that she has never in her 10 years working on these caucuses seen a result like this or seen this many people show up.
Was it required that the caucus take place in May?
No, it was not. There are some rules around when it can take place, and I don't remember exactly when they are. It has to take place within certain boundaries, within certain dates, but I think it can go into even early June. So it was an interesting choice of time. There were people who had wanted it to be held before Memorial Day, which is kind of the official start of summer. And there were some people, McKeon felt that there were people who weren't there to participate because of it being summer. That was one of the excuses that he offered, or the explanations, I should say, that he offered for how the result came out as it did.
Well, it's also unusual to hold this on a Saturday evening, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the previous dates have been, but it was, yeah, late on a Saturday, summer afternoon. It's an interesting choice, but this is a choice that was made by the committee. So they must have had their reasons. You know, it's a little opaque to us. Like, we didn't even know that this vote was happening to endorse a candidate. So it's a little unclear to me how all of this goes down. Apparently the vote was held anonymously and people were allowed to vote. I'm talking about for the endorsement, without being present in a room. So I don't know how they monitor that and keep track of who all the votes are coming in from. But that's the announcement that was made.
So let's talk about what happened at the caucus and what the results were, and then what we can look forward to and look ahead to.
Sure. So there were 242 ballots that were cast. So That's a possible 484 votes that could have been cast in total if each person had cast 2 votes. As I was saying earlier, Christina Ducharme, a novice politician, but has been on the planning board for a number of years, she received the most votes with 179 total cast. Ken Migliorelli, another political newcomer, but again, not new to the political scene in a sense in Red Hook, a farmer, well-known, runs the farmer's market or chairman of the farmer's market in Rhinebeck. He gathered 126 votes. And Christine Kane, the incumbent, took 111 votes. So as I said, there were a certain number. We did the calculation and think it was about 68 people only voted for one candidate. So that also caused the balance to be split between Christina and Kenny Migliorelli for those people who voted for Christine. So in any event, a very interesting outcome. And I think a thing that we really need to think about is what drove this outcome? What were the issues? There were no other incumbent major issues facing the election this moment, but for the boat club. And I think one of the reasons that McKeon sent his letter to the members of the community of Barrytown is that he knew there was possibility that they could swing the election. Now, that doesn't mean that other people didn't also show up because of the boat club, but certainly people in Barrytown were paying very great attention to that. But it seems that issue just really activated the community. It's an interesting fact because the boat club issue supposedly must by law be put to bed 90 days after the public hearing takes place. So the newly elected members of the town board, in effect, Christina Ducharme and Ken Migliorelli have effectively been elected to the town board because we don't have enough Republicans to cause an overturning of that result from the caucus in the November election. But they will not be voting on the actual decision to take the boat club by eminent domain. It's possible, I suppose, that the legal actions that have been taken by the boat club could come into play, and perhaps a judge will issue an injunction ordering the town board not to take any further action until he can rule or she can rule on the merits. So there's a lot of question marks now. There's also the possibility that a newly seated town board, where Robert McKeon and Bill Hammoud would likely vote as a block, Kenny Migliorelli and Christina Ducharme would likely vote as a block, and perhaps Jacob Testa would swing. Maybe there would be a chance to overcome an eminent domain vote in January, but that's really now very much on the tables. So we have another really important point here going on, which is how does this outcome affect the Troy Haley-Chris Munn primary, which comes up in 3 weeks, exactly 3 weeks from tomorrow, the primary to set the candidate for the Democratic Party in the November election for the 20th Legislative District, which is a district that includes virtually all of Red Hook, a northern swath of Rhinebeck. So what happens now with that? And many observers that I've been speaking to over the weekend since the result feel that this is a very important moment in that race, that people are frustrated with incumbency. They are looking for new leaders in the Democratic Party. Christina Ducharme, of course, is 43 years old. Kenny Migliorelli is 65. He and Christine Kane are roughly the same age, but we have now some new blood coming into the party and into the town governance. Maybe we would see some changes in that race. Just this morning, moments before we began to tape this show, I received a copy of a letter that Christopher Munn sent out to, I believe, to friends and family and so forth, talking about where this race goes from here. I have not even had time to read the letter, but it just shows that there is a lot of talk right now about what will happen next. And I think in that letter, from what I've heard, Munn acknowledges that he doesn't have the street force, the on-the-ground labor pool pulling for him that perhaps Troy Haley has. So there's kind of an insurgent moment happening now in that race that we'll be very interested to talk about in the coming days.
And we've discussed on previous podcasts how this boat club story has really generated so much passion. I mean, partly because it's a very easy situation for people to understand. It's not complex. It's a very sort of black and white situation. And I think that's also why it's engendered so much interest and passion.
Yeah, I think you're so right. And we're seeing people from outside our community interested in it. We're actually struggling to keep up with all the social media that's being posted on this issue. Just a few minutes ago, a woman in Red Hook posted to Red Hook Happenings that she had read and gone through every single piece of correspondence about this issue. I think she said there were several, hundreds and hundreds of pieces of correspondence that the town board has received. And we, of course, our comments to the catch feature, which allows people to take comments, make comments on stories, and we then elevate those every few weeks up until, we cut it off and start again. We're just absolutely inundated. Those columns are running 12, 13, 14 pages of content because we want every single person to be heard and to be read. It's amazing, Walter, how much time this is taking. And it's fascinating to see this kind of thing in action and to see how much people care about it on every side, every kind of person, wealthy, not wealthy, voters, non-voters, Democrats, Republicans, independents. Very, very interesting. I think there's one other point we should make about the upcoming November election for town board, and that is that Ken Migliorelli and Christina Ducharme also are going to be running as independents. They have declared their party Homegrown Red Hook. That's the name of it. They're running and campaigning together. They did that because even though it looked like Christina Ducharme would win a seat through the Democratic caucus, given that there were no additional people running, Ken Migliorelli didn't have such a close guarantee. He's not a Democrat and so forth. As we know, as I just explained, he did end up winning, but they had to get their petitions to be on the ballot in before the caucus. So they did so. Now, then a very interesting thing happened. Sometime between May 22nd and May 27th, Bill Hammoud, the deputy supervisor for the town, issued a challenge against the petitions to the Dutchess County Board of Elections. And the two candidates, Christina and Kenny Migliorelli, were advised, don't let this play out in court because it may not be resolved by November. So get your petition signatures teed up again. So in less than 2 days, they went out and they each got, I think it was 284 signatures or up to 300 signatures, each of them again in very short order. So their independent slots on the ballot are now secured. But isn't that a fascinating detail?
Very interesting.
Race. It also tells us where Bill Hammoud is on all of this, that he's aligned with McKeon on the Boat Club.
Well, it's good to see that democracy is alive and well in Red Hook.
Exactly.
There were so many moving parts to the story. I just want to circle back on one point that you made. Talk just a bit more about this 90-day deadline for the Boat Club decision.
Yeah, so our understanding is that once the public hearing is put into motion, so once that is held, and that was on May 16th, if my dates are not incorrect, that the town board or any elected board has then 3 months to cast a vote on the topic for which they held the hearing. So that would bring us to August. And they must decide, or they must start over with a new resolution, and that just gets the clock ticking again. So our expectation is that there would be a vote in August, in the month of August, about the Boat Club eminent domain proposal.
Unless, as you said, the lawsuit which the Boat Club has filed throws a wrench in the works.
Exactly, yes. And there, as we've discussed on a previous podcast, there are 2 different lawsuits in play right now. So there could be an injunction issued. There are other court actions that could be taken. I don't know all the details on all of them. We'll be running that down in the coming days. But that does now put things into a very interesting spotlight.
So it feels to me as if we'll be talking about this story for quite a while.
Yes, Walter, we're going to be talking about it, and I'll be trying to get some answers to everything.
Well, speaking about what's coming up, let's take a quick look ahead at some stories that we have in the pipeline.
Yes, thank you. So I don't know if there will be anything coming out of this, but tomorrow night there's a planning board meeting in Rhinebeck, and I see that on the agenda, we, again, for the first time in a long time, have the Eric Schmidt train on the agenda. So maybe we'll have a story, maybe we won't. Sometimes those things don't come off, but we'll be looking for that.
And let's just remind listeners about what is this Eric Schmidt train?
Oh, yeah. So Eric Schmidt owns property on the west side of River Road on the river, several hundred acres, and he has been working to construct a narrow gauge railroad that will shuttle friends and so forth around his property. And he's been building it in phases, and we'll see where that train is. He's also talked about earlier about possibly opening it up to school kids and community. There's some issues with that, but it's an interesting topic for the community just to see a return to some of the projects that Mr. Astor had when he was living there close to a century ago, more than a century.
And you and I had the opportunity to tour the property about a year and a half ago. It's a fascinating project.
Oh, wow. What did you think of it, Walter?
Until you see it, you don't really understand it. You really have to see it to understand the scale and scope of what he's doing, but it's really interesting.
Yeah, and it weaves through the woods and it's lovely. Quite an interesting project. So we'll be on top of that. We won't report back if there's nothing to say, but hopefully there will be. We are doing a story that may drop this week or maybe early next on the music scene in Kingston. We're very hyper local. We cover things that happen in Red Hook and Rhinebeck, but we also cover things of interest to our readers that are still within our band of locale, within a certain diametric or area. So we're going to be going over to Kingston and doing a story on the music scene, thinking that we have members of our community who are interested in what's going on over there. And apparently it's quite a hoppin' scene. So not something I'm very well aware of, but we've gotten a reporter on it, so we'll be reporting that out. And also on the music stage, as I mentioned last week, Isabel Luzzi, a 17-year-old student at Red Hook High School, will be taking to the stage at Olin Auditorium in several weeks on June 29th to play in memory of her deceased mother, her birth mother who died just moments after she was taken by cesarean section, and also to her real mother who's been the nurturer behind her great musical passion and talent. So we'll be doing I hope it's a nice, well-received story on that in the coming days, in the coming day or two.
And obviously the linkage between that story and the Lynn Nguyen story is interesting.
Yeah, exactly. It is. And we continue to talk to and reach out to people who've been the victims of motor vehicle fatalities in our community.
Great. So lots to look forward to. Let's close out today's podcast with the Our Top 3 section. I will go first today, if that's okay.
You do it. Go.
My first one is something fun. It's a 1-hour special on Netflix. If you just sort of want to sit back, relax, and watch something funny, it's called The Good Life with comedian Mike Birbiglia. Mike Birbiglia is a fairly well-known stand-up comic. It's a nice show. What he does is it's sort of a mix of comedy, obviously, and humor, but also some more heartfelt observations. So I really enjoyed it. It's called The Good Life on Netflix. My second recommendation is Giabatta in Tivoli. Giabatta is a lovely Italian restaurant right on Broadway in Tivoli. They also have some nice takeout food, and we frequently take out the chicken marsala, which is delicious. And then finally, speaking of food, the Rhinebeck Farmers Market is back in full swing on Sundays in Rhinebeck. I try to go frequently. It's just a great place to walk around, buy produce and buy things, but also just see people. It has a really fun energy. So the Rhinebeck Farmers Market every Sunday in Rhinebeck.
Awesome. So is that my lead to jump in with my ideas?
That's your lead.
All right. So I like to have an experience, a consumer tip, and a food tip. So today my experience is recommending the Spiegel tent. I have to admit, Walter, I was so embarrassed a few years ago when I was fairly new to Red Hook, but not new enough to have this as an excuse, that I had never heard of the Spiegel tent. I didn't even know what a Spiegel tent was. Well, I'm telling our listeners, if you have not gone to the Spiegel tent for a performance, you are missing a great, great treasure. It's a summer treasure. They situate the Spiegel tent kind of right in front of the Fisher Center at Bard. They have a different program every weekend. It's just a hoot. It's just fantastic. And they just released their schedule a few weeks ago, and I see they send out flyers over the weekend. So jump in, find something for which you can get a ticket and enjoy that. My consumer tip is I just discovered, probably again, late to the game, that Tops Market has wonderful flowers. If you need to bring flowers for something and you need a last minute place to go to Tops. They're not expensive, they're beautiful. And here's another little tip. They'll even trim them for you. If you buy a little vase or have a little vase in your hand, there's a woman there and you could just go ask at the customer service counter and she'll bring out her snips and she'll cut them for you. My third tip, my food tip, is the patio at Terrapin, which is also open now for the season. Wonderful place to sit. You can have a burger, have a salad. It's just a lovely place, and you can also watch the people going by. A number of food places now have outdoor seating, something that was born during COVID, and they've continued it, and Terrapin does a great job with it.
In fact, you and I just had a lunch there last week.
That's right. Exactly.
very
That's what
pleasant.
made me think of it. So
Yeah,
thank you.
exactly. Well, this concludes our 7th episode of The Catch Up. We hope you enjoyed listening. A big thank you to Matty Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud at Radio Free Rhinecilff for their help in producing today's episode. Emily, always a pleasure catching up with you.
Thank you, Walter. Great to be with you.